Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you another video. And today, we're going to be continuing our What If Deku Was the Son of Rock Lee, My Hero Academia Fighting Spirit Part 3. Always remember, if you haven't seen the latest video, then please go back and watch the previous parts in the playlist so you can be up to speed on the story and everything else as we continue on. Also, if you haven't, check out our other uploads from earlier in the week, including What If Issei Was the Shield Hero and What If Naruto Was the Avatar. Also, I do want to mention briefly before we start the video that I am going to be doing a bit of a poll, if you will, between the next 3 videos of this series. And that's that I want you guys to comment down below who you would like to see get One for All. Usually with My Hero Academia videos like this, I let you guys vote for who you would like the wielder to be. Now, if you guys want Izuku, then I have no problem with that. But my thing is that with My Hero Academia stories, I feel like a lot of times when you give Izuku a new power, I would prefer not to give him One for All if I can avoid it, simply because I feel like the whole reason of giving him a new power is to see how he would be without One for All, since the original story already has him with One for All. Now granted, if you want to combine it with another power from time to time, then I have no issue with that. But I do want you to try to keep that in mind, as I want the story to be as unique and as creative as possible. So you'll have this part and the next few to vote for who you would like to see get One for All. You can pick anyone you want, and whoever gets the most votes, that's going to be the person who gets the power. But stay tuned and remember to vote on that as we continue on with the story into the next coming weeks. But anyway, without further ado, as always, if you like the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. With the press learning that All Might was going to be a part of the UA school faculty, many of the students found themselves being rather nervous as the press was almost always around. None more so than Izuku, since not only was All Might there, but he was the son of one of the top 3 heroes in Japan, as well as the son of one of their more popular rescue heroes, in his mother. Izuku would keep his head down as the press would keep pestering many of the students. Using his abilities, he would be able to use a version of the body flicker. Nothing prominently fast, but it was fast enough for him to get from place to place without being detected. Before long, the students would have to select a class president. It was also decided that they would vote for the vice president as well. Izuku ended up being selected as long as Vice President Momo Yaoyorozu was selected as well. Many were happy with this decision, but Izuku on the other hand, this didn't really suit him at all. However, a situation would occur where the UA barrier detection would go off, and many of the students would hurry in a panic. Of course, Izuku could have easily have gone up and helped quell the crowd, but he saw this as an opportunity for his other friend and classmate Tenya Ida to take over as well. And as such, he would help Ida be the one to get everyone in order, and not before long, he would hand over the position to him. Ida would thank Izuku for this, and Izuku would tell him that he had confidence in him. Not too long after, the students would be taking a trip. The trip was going to be to a facility known as the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or the USJ. They would go to grab their hero costumes, and while Izuku's was a bit torn, it was thankfully repaired in time for the trip, and he had his stockpile of ninja weapons at his disposal. While on the bus to the facility, many of the students would be talking amongst themselves and asking questions. Of course, it didn't take long for them to know that Izuku was actually the son of Hirodora, or Rock Lee, and many of them were enamored with him. Izuku could see that he did earn the ire of some students, most notably the one known as Shoto Todoroki. However, Izuku tried to play it off, assuring them that it really wasn't that big of a deal. But for many of them, it really was, seeing as how he was the son of one of the top heroes in all of Japan, someone who could rival even All Might. At that comment, Bakugo would snarl a bit. He had already known this since they were children, and it never really bothered him all that much. He already knew what type of person Izuku was. Izuku never let something like his parents' fame and status get to his head. However, it did annoy him all the same. As the students would arrive, Mr. Aizawa would get them in order, as they would meet with the space hero, 13. They would speak amongst themselves, as they had gotten some late information that All Might wasn't going to be showing up, since it seemed as though he were running late. They decided that they were just going to have to continue on without him. The main point of this facility was to simulate all different types of accidents and natural disasters. Rescue work was just as important as fighting villains, and this was a way to see where their skills could be most applicable and could be put to the most use. However, as 13 was speaking, Izuku could feel something. It wasn't necessarily a sense per se, but it was like a tingle. He could feel that there might be something ominous coming about. He had no way of knowing what was about to happen next, as the doors would lock behind them. And from far off, on the other side of the facility, a black portal would open. The students would all see as dozens of villains would come through. Shoto would confirm the situation with the other students, telling them that it seemed as though they were under attack by villains. Mr. Aizawa and 13 would move to protect the students, gearing up for battle, as the pro hero Eraserhead was now going into action. Among the villains, two of them stood out in particular. A tall man dressed in a suit that seemed as though he were made out of a dark gas, and another one, someone dressed in black pants and a black long-sleeve shirt, with hands covering all over his body and his face, with his rather shaggy blue hair. These two were known as Kurogiri and Shigaraki, the heads behind the villains. The one, though, who were giving the orders was the one covered in the hands, Shigaraki, as he turned over to his assistant, Kurogiri. No. This doesn't seem to be going right at all, Kurogiri. I thought your intel stated that All Might was going to be here. Our sources did state that he would be here today, young master. But it seems as though he is running late. No manners at all. Oh well. Maybe we'll just have to make a situation for him to come here then. Perhaps if we slaughter all of his precious students, that'll catch his big grinning face. The villains would all be dispersed throughout the USJ at once. Mr. Aizawa would make his way to the front lines, battling a majority of the villains in the main front, while 13 stood close to the students. Kurogiri would use his quirk to teleport towards them. Izuku stood at the ready. However, before they could come up with a plan, Katsuki Bakugo and Ijiro Kirishima would attack Kurogiri both at once, but failed to do any damage. Kurogiri would use his quirk to teleport most of Class 1A and the students, all in different areas of the USJ. Izuku himself was teleported in the flood zone area. Thankfully, using his abilities to walk on water with chakra, he was able to land on his feet just fine. He was preparing for a villain to come his way, however, Tsuyu, or Froppy, would end up pulling him with his tongue onto the boat, where he would be along with Minoru Mineta. He would get to learn a little bit more about them, about their quirks and what they could do, and he could see that they were really afraid. Although he assured them that everything was going to be fine, they needed to focus and figure a way out. Once they were able to get up with a game plan, seeing how they could combine their skills, Izuku would get them into position. He would jump into the air and perform a very powerful leaf hurricane. The pressure from his kicks strong enough to rock the waters many times over. And in doing so, he would have Mineta use his sticky balls to be thrown into the water and tie up all of the villains at once. And Tsuyu, using her tongue, would wrap them up and throw them far away, Izuku adding in another leaf hurricane for good measure. In the meantime, All Might would be with Recovery Girl. Thankfully, he still had some time left in his buff form. However, he knew that it wasn't long enough to be with the students, and he wished he could have been there. Meanwhile, back at the USJ, many of the students were fighting off the villains in their respective zones, using their abilities to their advantage. Thankfully, these were low-level villains, so they couldn't really do all that much in the grand scheme of things. As for Izuku, along with Mineta and Froppy, they would eventually make their way out of the flood zone. They were surprised to see that Izuku could run on water, and how swift he was able to do so. They wondered just who he was, and how on earth was he able to do these type of things, especially claiming to be quirkless of all things as well. It really just didn't make any sense to them. However, Izuku would tell them to be quiet, as they carefully snuck throughout the different parts of the USJ. In the meantime, both Bakugo and Kirishima would be taking care of their batch of villains respectively, being able to blast through and knock them back down with relative ease. As the fights continued all the way around, Kurogiri and Shigaraki would notice Eraserhead as he was mowing through most of their villains. Of course, they didn't expect to be facing the Eraser hero, Eraserhead. However, they had contingencies for someone like him. And soon, they would summon their trump card. From another portal, a large, monstrous beast would appear. He had a body that was almost the size of All Might in its prime. Its dark-hide skin and its bird-like face, with a dome on its head that exposed its outer brain. Let me introduce you to my friend here. This is what we call a Nomu. This creature has been built and designed especially to kill Prime All Might. So if you really think that you stand a chance, you're more than welcome to come and try, Eraser Hero. Although, I'm afraid you won't like the results. Aizawa would turn to the Nomu that would come charging at him all at once. Mr. Aizawa would effortlessly dodge his attacks, moving swiftly as he attempted to use his eraser quirk to erase its power. He had been able to do so, but even still, the Nomu was incredibly strong, and it started to thrash him round rather easily. As most of the students were gathering together back near the entranceway, they knew that they needed to get out and get help. They had tried to use Kaminari's radio to signal for help, but it seemed as though the whole area had been blocked away from the outside world. The only thing they could do was open the door manually and send someone out to get help. Once they were able to pry the door open, they believed that the best person to go out and get help as fast as possible would be Tenya Ida. Kurogiri would notice this and would attempt to stop him from escaping, but thankfully he was able to use Recipro Burst, and once he was able to break free, he slipped through to go get backup. Kurogiri would go and warn Shigaraki of this, but Shigaraki believed that they had enough time, and that if this could bring All Might to them even faster, then the more the merrier. Mr. Aizawa would continue his fight with Inomu. However, it wasn't looking too good on his end. He was seemingly getting pushed back at every which way, being beaten into the ground over and over. Mineta and Froppy would look on horrified. They wanted to get away as soon as possible, but Izuku knew that he couldn't leave. He knew he had to stay and fight. He would turn back to his classmates and tell them to make their way towards the entrance. But Midoriya, you can't just stay back and fight that thing. If Mr. Aizawa can't beat him, then... Look, we don't have time to complain, alright? You two need to go as soon as possible. I'm going to go and get Mr. Aizawa out of there. When I do, you take him back to the entranceway, and I'll hold him off for as long as I can. But, Midoriya, you shouldn't... We should allow the... Froppy, we don't have time. Please, just trust me. The two would have no other choice but to do so. Izuku would close his eyes and focus. He would open the first gate. Getting down into a crouching stance, he would shoot off from the ground in a burst of speed. As Inomu was about to bring its fist back down onto Mr. Aizawa, seemingly going to crush his skull, a blur of green would come out of nowhere, Izuku grabbing his teacher as he flung him towards the others. You two, get Mr. Aizawa and get him out of here now. As for you, I'll be your opponent. Who is this kid? I do not know, but based off of his uniform and his look, he seems to be tailored after that other hero. You mean him? The one that helped defeat Master all those years ago? Yes, I believe that is the one. It was 5 years ago, when the hero known as Hirodora, along with All Might, dealt the critical blow to our master. And for this young one to be dressed similar to him, either he takes great inspiration or he is the son. Very well. Hey boy, tell me, do you know of the hero Hirodora? Yeah, I know him. What about it? I think you two might be a lot closer than you're letting on. I don't know what you're talking about. Very well. Let's play that game then, shall we? Nomu, change of plans. That boy in front of you, I want you to rip him in half. The Nomu would screech out like a mindless, monstrous beast as it went straight towards Izuku. Izuku would back up to create space. He could feel that his body was starting to be drained from just using the first Lotus. However, he had enough energy to go a bit further. He would jump in the air and perform the Leaf Hurricane, kicking it in its chest, sending it back a few feet, before he jumped forward and delivered a barrage of coordinated kicks and punches to the chest. The other students watching from the platform as Mr. Aizawa was taken back to them couldn't believe what they were seeing. Izuku was holding his own against that beast. It caused a few of the others to be a bit worried, but also a bit hopeful. From out of nowhere, not too far away, the sound of an explosion could be heard, as Bakugo, followed by Kirishima, would be making their way towards where the action was. They would see Izuku fighting against the Nomu, and they were impressed. Of course, Bakugo didn't want to be shown up at all, and if anyone was going to take down that stupid thing, it was going to be him. He went running in without hesitation, and Kirishima went to go back him up. They could see Izuku was starting to slow down a bit, one of the drawbacks of using the first gate. He lost his footing for a moment, and the Nomu would punch him in the chest, knocking him back to the ground. He seemed as though he were about to be done for, as a large explosion would appear between him and the Nomu, stunning it for a moment as Kirishima would punch it and sending it back just a little bit. "Well, you damn nerd. I thought you were going to be able to handle this all on your own. I guess that martial arts crap can only get you so far, huh?" Kachan? Well, I'm going to be dealing with this thing now. Hey, bird brains, get a load of this. Bakugo would put both of his fists together. Taking a deep breath, he would launch a large explosion that would shoot it in the chest some more, knocking it back just a bit. Kirishima would help move Izuku out of the way, checking on him and making sure he was alright. And also to tell him that what he did was really manly. The way that he was able to just jump in like that and fight against the Nomu. As Bakugo would continue hurling explosions at it, a great wall of ice would then arise, trapping half of the Nomu's body. Bakugo would launch another powerful explosion, giving it everything he had. The ice was so powerful enough, combined with the explosion, that it broke off the Nomu's arm and leg. I didn't need your help, Icehead. But anyway, his arm and leg is now gone, so we've got the advantage here. You really think so, huh? That Nomu was made to kill All Might in its prime. You really think some loose-neck kids like you really stand a chance? Come on, your XP isn't high enough for this game. The students would then become horrified, as the Nomu's arms and legs would regrow all at once, as it stood back on its feet. The Nomu would kick at Bakugo, who would try to block it with his arms. He could feel something snap as he went flying into one of the nearby piles of debris. Todoroki from a distance would try to create more walls of ice. It would slow it down, but the Nomu would simply keep on going. Soon, I will destroy you, and your great symbol of peace. Everything that you cling to will all be for nothing. Izuku would slowly rise to stand again. He would thank Kirishima for his help, but now he was going to have to jump back into the fight. Kirishima asked if that was a wise decision. He looked like he was completely spent. He didn't know how much he had left in him. But Izuku would look back to him with a confident smile on his face. The hidden lotus blooms twice. Kirishima had no idea what he meant by that, but he would simply tell him to stand back and that he was going to have to go to another level. As Izuku would take a deep breath, he would feel the surge of chakra begin to swell within him. Thankfully, the limit had now been reached, and it was time to open the next gate. The Gate of Rest. As he did so, his body would be flooded and re-energized completely, allowing him to increase his upper physical strength to the absolute limit. As his muscles began to expand just a little, Izuku would move forward at once. Rushing at the Nomu would be prepared for the attack, However, now, the hits seemed to fly tenfold, even greater than before. Izuku would continue to use his upper kicks over and over again, kicking it high into the air. He was going to perform the primary lotus. He would continue to do the rapid kicks, kicking the Nomu higher and higher and higher, not slowing down for a moment. As Izuku had focused more on his Muay Thai than anything else, his kicking ability had increased greatly. Everyone in the room would watch as Izuku and the Nomu went flying into the air over and over again. For Kirigiri and Shigaraki, there was no mistaking it. That boy had a connection to Hiradora. It had to be his son. Once Izuku had launched the 20th kick, sending the Nomu almost up to the ceiling, his binding around his hands would be undone, as he wrapped him all the way around from behind. As they went spiraling towards the ground together, it looked as though Izuku was going to spike him on his head using a pile driver. But he wasn't done yet. He had one more trick up his sleeve. He had to time this just right, and he knew his body was going to be wrecked for it later. But this was an all-or-nothing gambit. As they came close to connecting to the ground, about less than 100 feet away, Izuku would take a deep breath as he forced open the third gate, the gate of life. He would scream out, "Open!" His skin would start to turn red. A faint glow would appear around him, and he seemed to increase his speed as they went rocketing towards the ground head first. Before anyone could react, a large explosion would occur next. A great boom and thud. Smoke would bellow all throughout the USJ, and no one could see what was happening. They couldn't tell what was going on. Did he just spike himself into the ground? With that level of force, he might have broke his neck. As the smoke began to clear though, they could see that Izuku was on the ground just fine, completely laid out, but he was just fine nonetheless. He couldn't seem to move at all, and Izuku knew that he couldn't. Pain was filling all of his arms and legs, including his chest. The whiplash of using the inner gates was something he wasn't entirely used to. And once more, the Nomu was now head first into the ground. He could hear that something had cracked. He thought he might have broken that damn thing's neck. He didn't like to use something that lethal, but he didn't have any other choice in this moment. At first, everyone thought that he had won. That had to be enough. However, the Nomu would slowly get back on its feet once again. Its neck had been snapped, broken in 4 different places. However, the Nomu would simply snap it back into place, although it was still stunned a little bit from the assault. Oh man, if something like that wasn't strong enough, then what the hell are we going to do? Kirishima would bellow. However, from the other side of the USJ, the door would come shooting open immediately, as All Might would appear. The Nomu would be moving to finish off Izuku immediately. However, before it could do so, All Might would deliver a Texas Smash, hitting it in the face and knocking it away from Izuku, as he picked up the young boy. You're ever much like your father, always going in head first, without any care in the world. I do commend you for holding it down for me, young Midoriya. You were able to buy me enough time to get here. Now you rest. I'll deal with him from here. All Might would quickly take him to the other 4 boys nearby, telling them to keep him safe and to stay out of the fight. This was what Shigaraki had wanted from the start anyway, and he believed that his Nomu was more than strong enough to defeat him. However, there was one thing that he hadn't counted on. Izuku might not have done enough damage to win. This was true. But he had done enough damage to weaken the Nomu just enough, even with its ability to regenerate and to have the ultimate line of defense. There was a crack. It wasn't much, but this crack was just enough within the Nomu itself that gave All Might just the opening that he needed. The other students would watch on as All Might and the Nomu would continue to fight. It looked as though they were fighting on another level. Izuku could sense this power, even while half unconscious. He could tell that this was something entirely different. This was a power that only he and his father could know of. He knew that if he really wanted to be the best, that he still had so much farther to go. They all did. Each boy looking on completely enamored with All Might, as the symbol of peace showed his true power. It seemed as though the fight was going to be at a standstill. They weren't sure how much longer All Might could last. However, thankfully, All Might had not given up one for all yet, and so he could still use it to its truly fullest extent. All Might knew that in order to finish the fight, he would have to go beyond. He would punch at the Nomu repeatedly, not allowing it a chance to heal or recover. He would show why he was truly the symbol of peace. Knowing that he had to surpass his limits, he had to go beyond, to go plus ultra. Fighting and shooting past 100% himself, All Might would deliver almost 1,000 punches a minute. The Nomu would be overwhelmed, as All Might would deliver the final blow. Shooting away at the Nomu with its mighty fist, he would go flying into the side of the USJ before being knocked out of the building completely. All Might would stand proud, for he had won. Shigaraki and Kurogiri would start to feel panic. This wasn't supposed to go this way. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. The game. They cheated. That's what it was. They cheated. How was he supposed to know that the son of Hiradora was going to be here? Had he had known that, he would have planned things differently. He would have bought at least 2 Nomu. No, they were cheaters. That's what they were. They were no good cheaters. But that was okay, because he would get them next time. But right now, All Might was in front of him, and All Might wasn't moving. Was it because he was tired? Or maybe it was because he couldn't move. He would tell Kurogiri to open a hole. He was going to see if maybe he could deal the finishing blow. Deku would see this coming. He could see it before anyone else. The portal opening in front of All Might. Shigaraki reaching out his hand towards him. Izuku knew he didn't have anything left. Nothing at all. But something sparked him to move. He wasn't sure of what it was. It was as if his body simply reacted on its own. He used whatever little bit of strength he had left. He jumped up on his feet. He focused all of his energy into his left foot. He pushed off and went rocketing, flying over All Might. Just as the portal opened, and Shigaraki and Izuku would come face to face in that moment, Izuku would deliver one roundhouse kick to the face, knocking Shigaraki away. He would yell out in pain as the door would open and multiple bullets would go flying towards Shigaraki. hitting him in the arms and the legs as he went crashing into the ground. Izuku felt as though he were about to fall, but All Might would catch him in time as he started to steam and bellow. Izuku could tell that it was because All Might, his body was still about to run out. Thankfully, within the smoke screen, no one could see what All Might was about to change into. And luckily, the other heroes were able to get him out of there, as well as the students, in time. As the villains were rounded up, Izuku and All Might and Mr. Aizawa would be taken to the hospital, where Recovery Girl would heal them and make sure that they were okay. It didn't take long for Izuku's parents to be told of what had happened. Even though Lee was far away, when he heard the news about his son, he went rushing towards him. As for his mother was already there, making sure that her baby boy was safe. As they were in the room with All Might and Recovery Girl, Inko already knowing the secret about All Might, as she was connected with Rock Lee, and she had agreed to keep this secret for a while. She would thank All Might for saving her son, and she would commend him. And the room would become a lot more quiet. The door would open as Lee would come rushing in immediately, heading towards Izuku's bed. "Son, are you alright? What happened?" "Hey, Dad. I'm fine. Just my body's completely wrecked." "I see. You used the inner gate, didn't you?" "Yeah. I'm sorry. I know you put restrictions, but I didn't have a choice." "Please, Lee, don't be too upset at Midoriya. It was truly a life or death situation. If he hadn't done what he did, he wouldn't have bought me enough time to get there as soon as possible, and things could have been a lot worse." Izuku would see his father. Lee would smile. His smile would be that of someone who was extremely proud. He patted his son on his head and told him that he couldn't have expected any better from his son. Izuku was happy with this, as his mother and father would comfort him. As they did so, Lee would turn over to All Might. The two hadn't seen each other in a while, and they had some catching up to do. He would also learn about what they had fought against, the Nomu. Just as Izuku had told the police officer that had questioned him, he would explain to both his father and to All Might the situation at hand. Whatever that thing was, it was made specifically to fight All Might, to fight a primed All Might. He also speculated that in all likelihood, this was a coordinated attack, since the villains were able to make a deduction that he was Lee's son. Of course, Izuku felt a bit ashamed of this, as he thought he should have done a better job at concealing his identity. But Lee would tell him that it was alright, and that he had nothing to be ashamed of. After all, they were father and son. They fought and moved almost identically. I mean, this distinction was bound to happen eventually. If the students already knew, then likely villains would find out as well. Inko would be a bit worried now. Was her family going to be targeted? If this Shigaraki guy truly had in for All Might and for Hiradora, as they were both the ones who dealt the critical blow to All for One all those years ago, then it meant that in all likelihood they might be targeted. The police chief would tell Izuku, Inko, and Lee to stay on their toes at all times. They were going to be having a few more heroes and police do some stakeouts, as well as doing patrols in their area. After all, they never knew when the villains might strike. Eventually, the other students would come inside and they would check in on how Izuku was doing. Thankfully, All Might was moved to another room, so they wouldn't see him in his deflated form. Izuku would tell them that he was fine for the most part, and he was just happy that everyone had made it out alive. Everyone would laugh and cheer around for a bit, although they were still worried for Mr. Aizawa. They would learn from Recovery Girl that he was going to be doing just fine. Thankfully, due to Izuku's actions, the damage he took wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. Although classes were going to be stopped for the next 2 days to allow them some time to recover, give them a chance to take a break. Izuku was happy for this, as he was going to need all of the recovery that he could get. He would stay in the hospital for another day. Thankfully, his recovery was a lot better than that of the average human, even with a quirk. However, he was told to take it easy, and both Inko and Lee made sure that their son didn't do any kind of training, since Lee knew full well the type of damage that could come from using the inner gates. And so, Izuku would simply rest in his bed, taking it easy for once in his life. Soon, not too long after, class would resume as normal. There was still a bit of buzz about the attack, and the media was swarming around even more than usual. But thankfully they were able to quell things down for now, and they were able to keep information close to the vest, so to speak. Mr. Aizawa would commend the students for how they conducted themselves, and he would thank Izuku for saving him. But now, they had to push past this situation, as something else was now coming on the horizon. An event that was going to be held by the school to allow them to display all of their powers and abilities. That's right, the upcoming UA Sports Festival was just a short ways away, and it was time for the students to go plus ultra. This concludes What If Deku Was the Son of Rock Lee? My Hero Academia Fighting Spirit Part 3. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have on the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that is to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we're going to be continuing Darling in the Franxx Lionhearted. Darling in the Franxx X Voltron Legendary Defender. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.